Good to see you all, and well done for making it such a dreary day. I'm going to carry on with a short sort of painting project. So this is our last week of January, and so I thought today I'd cover a little bit on colour. So just a brief for most people on colour. So nice to see that we've got a few different interesting things coming. And also just to introduce next month's project. So I think this is our last week in January, and I have managed to do something from observation each day so far. So this will be my business today. This one I did on Thursday. So really just looking at colour and trying to get as much painted with just the primaries really. I can't remember if I did a background with primaries, but this bit was. So that's the idea. The next project, the one we've got lined up for February, I'm kind of using this book as a little bit of inspiration. So the idea is sort of painting into the light or drawing into the light, looking into the light. So it's a particular kind of way of looking where where the light source is sort of really at the back and things are thrown into silhouette. So this one, that's probably a better example. So what happens is you've got a light source in the distance and things tend to be sort of thrown in shadow. So there's a term called contre-jour, which means against the light. So it's like a particular artistic device or design device, particular way that some artists, technique that some artists employ. So it can give quite interesting atmospheric, look to paintings. So that's the theme for next month. So if you've got any ideas or if you've got any particular references you'd like to use, I'll have a look through my photo. I mean, quite a lot of my photos are, it's something that I've tried using quite a few times. And this book, I bought this last year when I won some book vouchers, so I thought I'd quite like to go work, but I'll get that one. So if anyone wants to have a look at that for a bit of inspiration, that'll be next month's project. I think there's some sort of reference that you could use. And as I say, I'll have a look through the ones I've got. Right, okay, so I very quickly just sketched out this still life. So it gives me a little house and a little bit of fruit. I wanted to recap these colour ideas. So, like that, you see. So, I'll pop it up there, that won't be easy. So this is really the colour wheel I suggest we use, and some sort of version of these colours I think are essential for when we're painting. Now quite often I'll come in and I'll see people and they'll have like maybe one or two colours and they won't have a particular, and then they'll have some sort of greys or some beiges to choose of. But I think these are the ones to start with and then add in from there. So more or less one each of these would be a good place to start. So, in terms of the reds, the wheel is called a colour bias wheel, and it comes from a book called Yellow and Blue Don't Make Green. So it's like a colour theory book and colour mixing book. And the idea is that you have two of each of the primary colours. So primary colours are colours you can't actually mix. So you can't mix a blue, you can't mix a red or a yellow. And you have say for instance, you might have a yellow that's got a very slight bias towards an orange. So you've got, and then a red that's got a slight bias towards the orange. So you've got colours that are biased towards the secondary colours. So the secondary colours are things like purples, oranges and greens. Colours that you can mix, colours. And then with yellows, you might have a greeny yellow, you might have a greeny blue. There's quite a lot of different green blues you could have. So I'll put cerulean there, but there's a whole range. Prussian blue, phthalo blue, manganese blue. They're all sort of greeny blues. A purpley blue, which I think is ultramarine. I don't think there are any other purpley blues that I know of. So it's got a slightly purple feel to it. And then a purpley red, again, there's lots you could choose, things like magenta, orange, alizarin crimson, just anything that's sort of more on the crimson-y bias, rose, they're all quite purpley reds, and as I say, orangey red. So with those, you can mix an awful lot of colours. So for instance, if I wanted to, I'll use some of the colours in the still life. Say I wanted an orange, I've got this tangerine here. This is a cadmium yellow, which is quite quite an orangey yellow. And then I've got an orangey red there, which is a cadmium red. Now, I only need the tiniest bit of red, because actually red is a really powerful colour. So I find that when I'm mixing colours, I put a bit of the yellow down, then put most of my red here, and then just mix a little bit of that in, because that will very, very quickly turn to orange. And that will be quite nice for maybe, I probably shouldn't have gone on such a dark background really, but will that cover? It's not too bad. I've got quite a bit of this colour coming through, which is perhaps ideal. Some of that is a little bit red around here, so perhaps add a tiny bit of that back in. Now this side, the other side, is more in shadow. So on that side, I'm going to need to mix a bit more because I'm running out. Need to sort of tone it down a little bit and desaturate it. So what I tend to do, if I want to make it a bit browner, I would add so far I've got an orange from here, I'd add what's opposite on the colour wheel, so a tiny bit of blue. And I tend to go for the ultramarine. And again, pick up a little bit, pop most of it down, because it will very quickly, you can see it's turning green. So add a little bit of that in. It's a little bit too green that, so I'll add a bit more red. I'll go for the other red this time, I'll go for a crimson. So you can see that makes something a little bit browner. So that would be better for this sort of shadow here, perhaps a bit more shadow on here. That kind of gives me a little bit more of a shadow. And then highlights, there's a few highlights there, so that's probably where I would need to just add a little bit of white in. I've got a little bit of white there. Mix that in. It's not bright white, but I need a little bit. It needs a little bit of a lift here and there. Just picking up a few flecks. So that would be that. Underneath here, there's quite a strong shadow, and it's not anything particular. So I will mix a few different, basically just to mix a dark for that. Hi Andy. So going back to the brown, and then a tiny bit of the blue, and that gets me to a sort of darkish browny colour. Maybe a bit more blue, a bit more blue and red, I think. Yeah, so again, it might go a little, that should probably do, but a little bit of shadow just under here. Yeah, and then I can soften that out. Got a bit of water there. So this tabletop, it's not been washed. This tabletop is a kind of palish yellow. It's a little bit brown in there, so it's not too bright. That's a bit warmer, a little bit of the red in. So it's a bit, in a way, it's a bit like steering a car. You know, if you find you're going a bit too green, maybe you'd add a bit of red into it. So it's sort of just using those few colours. And I've always found that this is quite a good way of learning colour mixing. So that's getting a bit closer to the colour of the table. Now it's not like a really bright yellow, so it's probably a bit more with this brown mixed in, that I'm mixing over here, just to dull it down a little bit. That's a bit closer to what I've got in those areas. Might be better to get that in and then put the shadow in. Again, the actual house itself, the roof bit is a brown, but it's quite a reddy brown, so I think a bit more crimson in with that, a little bit more yellow than that. And then that's a bit too bright, so that's where I start to put some blue. And I think I'll just try this blue just to see. So this is more of a greeny blue, just to see what that does. It's not too bad. That's a bit more red. And I'll go with the other blue, it's going to be more ultramarine. Yeah, that's getting a bit closer. A bit like that. Yep, so that could be the, it's not quite there, but it's kind of going in the right sort of direction. So that's it's as I say, just using primary colours, seeing how far you can get with your mixes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you fancy trying that, that's something we did. Okay. Is there anybody want to ask anything? No? Okay, right.
I saw Sunday, one on Sunday, yeah. One on Sunday. Oh, the Palace, yeah. Yeah. I still look at some of the pictures and I think, really like that. I don't know that. Yeah, I didn't really, I'm trying to remember that.
Remember at my house.
Yeah, there was one that was, there's not often that I see one, I think that's weird, really like that. Yeah. But it's interesting to see. Sometimes some of these people who are painting on the outside, they're even better. But yeah, it is a good photo. I didn't realise it's on the sun. That's the easiest way to do it.